9:52 p.m. The Caldwell Terrace room, 21st floor of the Sterling Meridian Hotel, had not gone this quiet since the fire alarm 3 years ago. And even then, people had kept talking. Now they didn't. 18 musicians held their instruments without playing them. Waitstaff stopped mid-step between tables. 2 board members who had been deep in conversation since the second course found themselves turning without quite realizing they had turned toward the center of the floor. Min Jae Kang was crouching down, not adjusting a cuff, not retrieving something from the floor. He was crouching down to be at eye level with a child who couldn't have been older than 5, standing in the middle of that chandelier-lit room in a red coat, 2 sizes too large, hands loose at her sides, looking back at him without a single trace of fear. At the far edge of the floor, a young woman in a catering server's uniform had gone completely still. The silver tray in her hands tilted almost imperceptibly. She caught it. She didn't look down to check. Her eyes didn't move from the child. Then Min Jae Kang spoke. 4 words. Low enough that the guests near the back had to lean forward to be certain they'd heard correctly. Show me that again. Before this story goes any further, if you've ever stood at the edge of something uncertain and couldn't tell whether stepping forward was brave or foolish, you already understand a little of what that room felt like at that moment. Drop a comment right now. Tell me where in the world you're watching from and what time it is where you are. If you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, do it now, because what happened next in that room is not a story you want to walk into halfway through.
It's all right. Just look at me. I won't let anything happen to you tonight.
No one in the Caldwell Terrace room that night understood what they were about to witness, not the board members, not the donors, not even Zara Ellis, who had worked this event for 3 years running and had never once been afraid until this particular moment. That fear had 2 completely different sources. She wouldn't understand that until much later. The babysitter's text arrived at 5:47 p.m. 3 words. No apology. Can't make it. Zara Ellis read it twice, set her phone face down on the bathroom counter, and stood very still for 11 seconds. This was a skill she had developed over 5 years of single motherhood, the ability to absorb a crisis without letting it touch her face, because Maya was usually watching, and Maya read faces the way other children read picture books. Tonight was the Midwest Children's Arts Initiative annual gala at the Sterling Meridian Hotel, 21st floor. Zara had worked this event for 3 consecutive years. She knew every name on the guest list, every table assignment, every course timing, every exit. What she had never planned for was bringing her 5-year-old daughter to any of it. She dressed Maya in the red coat, packed a coloring book, a box of colored pencils, and a granola bar into the small backpack Maya used for preschool. In the taxi, she gave the same instructions she had given in hotel hallways and service corridors for years, adapted now for the one person in her life she couldn't leave behind. You sit in the alcove by the service door. You don't move unless I come get you. You don't talk to anyone. Maya nodded, with the gravity of a child who understood rules even when she didn't understand the reasons for them. Okay, Mama. The Caldwell Terrace room was the kind of space that had been designed, whether intentionally or not, to remind people of the distance between themselves and everyone who couldn't afford to be there. Crystal chandeliers, 1,200 square feet of polished herringbone floor, an 18-piece orchestra positioned at the north end, chairs arranged with the precision of a military formation. Dinner tickets at $380 per person, tables of 10. The checks already written months ago by people who wrote checks the way others signed birthday cards. The Midwest Children's Arts Initiative raised money for youth art programs across Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio. It was a good cause. Most of the people in this room genuinely believed that. What most of them did not notice, because it was not the kind of thing people in rooms like this were built to notice, was that the young woman refilling water glasses along the east wall had spent 40 minutes getting her daughter settled in a corridor alcove with a coloring book before her. Shift began. By 9:30 p.m., the dinner plates had cleared, and the room had relaxed into the particular warmth that expensive wine and string music produced in people who already liked themselves. That was when Helena Marsh signaled Carol Hampton. Helena Marsh had been a platinum donor for 4 consecutive years. $500,000 per cycle, her name on the program's dedication page, in a font 2 sizes larger than anyone else's. She wore silver silk and the practiced graciousness of a woman who had learned that charity functioned best when it remained at a comfortable distance from the people it claimed to help. Carol Hampton had been the banquet supervisor at the Sterling Meridian for 14 years. She had managed 2 near fires, one medical emergency involving a federal judge, and approximately 4,000 conversations she would have preferred not to have. She crossed the room toward Helena Marsh, with the expression she reserved for situations that required complete professionalism and absolutely no honesty. Helena Marsh leaned in slightly when Carol arrived, not whispering, simply pitched low in the way of someone who considered discretion a courtesy she extended to others, rather than a constraint on herself. Carol, there's a child near the service corridor who doesn't appear to belong to any of the guests. I'd hate for something to go missing from the coat room later. Carol Hampton's expression did not change. I'll look into it, Mrs. Marsh. She turned and walked away. Zara Ellis was 3 feet behind her, carrying a tray of water glasses from the East Service Station. She heard every word. She had been hearing versions of that sentence for most of her adult life, different rooms, different tones, the same fundamental meaning arriving ahead of any evidence and requiring no justification to speak aloud. The child who didn't belong, the person who might take something. She kept walking. She did not let it touch her face. But her hands, invisible beneath the tray, pressed just a little harder against the silver. Min-jae Kang arrived at 7:49 p.m., 19 minutes after the official start time. He did not apologize to the event coordinator who met him at the elevator. He did not pause to review the seating chart. Kang Capital Group had contributed $2.3 million to this initiative over 3 years, and men who contributed $2.3 million to anything were generally forgiven for being 19 minutes late. He was 28 years old. The suit jacket was charcoal, not fully buttoned, precise enough that no one could object, deliberate enough that everyone noticed. Jason Park followed half a step behind, phone already in hand, eyes moving across the room with the practiced efficiency of someone paid to assess exits and opportunities in the same glance. Carol Hampton crossed paths with Min-jae near the north end of the room during the social hour. Less than 90 seconds, a brief exchange about the foundation's new program director, the kind of conversation that existed only to fill the space between people who had nothing genuine to say to each other. Afterward, as she turned back toward the service stations, Carol said something quietly to the floor manager walking beside her. She did not raise her voice. She was not speaking to anyone in particular. His mother used to hum while she worked. Every floor she cleaned at the Whitfield, years ago. The floor manager glanced at her. Carol Hampton did not explain further. She never did. At 9:47 p.m., the orchestra shifted into a new piece. Jazz classical, the alto cellos low and deliberate beneath everything. The violins layered light above them like a second conversation happening in the same room. It was the kind of music that pulled rather than played, that asked rather than announced. Maya Ellis had been in the service alcove for 2 hours and 11 minutes. She had finished the coloring book. She had eaten the granola bar. She was, in the way of children who had spent too many hours in too many small spaces waiting for a parent to return, beginning to drift toward the sound. She did not disobey. She simply followed. By the time she reached the edge of the main room, she had already stopped thinking about the instruction. The music was too close. She found a column at the far west wall where the light was softer and the guests were fewer, and she began to move. Not a performance, not a routine, nothing anyone had ever taught her. Her fingers tapped against the column in rhythm with the bass line. Her feet shifted small at first, then wider. Her shoulders answered something in the violin section that the rest of the room was too busy being seen to notice. She was not dancing for anyone. She was simply hearing music the way some people heard it through the whole body, not just the ears. Min-jae Kang had been checking his watch. He had calculated he could leave at 10:15 p.m. without it being considered a slight. Jason Park had identified 2 board members worth speaking to before then. The evening was moving according to a plan that required no further attention from him. He glanced across the room and stopped. Not the stopping of a man who had seen something dangerous. Not the stillness of calculation or threat assessment. Something else entirely, the kind of stop that happened when something moved past every layer of professional distance a person had spent years constructing and arrived, uninvited, at whatever was underneath. The child was not performing. Every other person in this room in their silk gowns and tailored suits, their practiced laughter, and their curated generosity was performing something. The child near the west column was not performing anything at all. She was just listening. Across 200 feet of chandelier light and conversation and the low swell of the orchestra, Min Jae Kang and Maya Ellis looked at each other at the same moment. Maya did not stop moving. She simply looked at him the way she would have looked at the music itself openly, without calculation, with the particular fearlessness of a child who had not yet been taught that certain rooms required a different kind of face. Carol Hampton, standing near the East Service Station, saw Min Jae Kang go still. In 14 years, she had watched him move through 3 galas, 2 board dinners, and one very difficult press situation without once losing the controlled surface he carried behind him. She had never seen him go still like that. She set down her clipboard and began walking toward the west column. Min Jae Kang was already moving faster than she was. What Zara would not know until much later was that the man walking toward her daughter had not looked at anything, not a deal, not a person, not a single room with that much undivided attention in over 4 years. He stopped 2 feet from her, not close enough to crowd her. Close enough that she had to tilt her head up to see his face. Min Jae Kang looked at the child for a moment, the red coat, the small hands, the feet that had gone still the second she realized she was no longer alone, and then he said, very quietly, "Do you know what you're doing?" Maya considered the question with the seriousness it apparently deserved. Then she shook her head. "No. Show me again." Carol Hampton had arrived just behind him. She opened her mouth. Min Jae did not look at her. Carol Hampton had been reading rooms for 14 years, and she closed her mouth and took one step back without being asked. Maya looked at Min Jae for one full second, assessing something, though no one watching could have said what, and then she simply began again. The orchestra had not stopped. The bass line was still there, low and insistent, and Maya's feet found it immediately, the way they had the first time, without searching for it. But something was different now. The first time she had moved because the music asked her to and no one was watching. This time someone was watching, and she still moved the same way. Not adjusted for an audience. Not pulled toward performance. Still just listening. Still just answering. That was the thing that changed the temperature in that corner of the room. A woman near the adjacent table leaned toward her companion without realizing she had. A man standing 6 feet away stopped the sentence he was midway through and didn't return to it. A server carrying a dessert course to table 14 slowed her pace by 2 steps without any conscious decision to do so. Min Jae Kang watched. His jaw shifted almost imperceptibly. He raised his right hand and pressed 2 fingers lightly against the column beside him, a small motion, barely visible, and began to keep her rhythm. He didn't ask himself why. It was simply what the moment required. Jason Park, standing 4 feet behind him, saw it happen. His eyes moved from Min Jae's hand on the column to the child, to the growing ring of peripheral attention gathering around them, and his expression did the particular thing it did when an unplanned variable entered a controlled situation. He said nothing. He started calculating. The music moved through another phrase. Maya moved with it, a turn that was technically imprecise and somehow completely right. A small extension of the arms that no instructor had ever shown her, a stillness at the end of the phrase that landed exactly where it should. Min Jae Kang turned toward the room. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. There was a particular register, calm, unhurried, carrying the quiet authority of someone who had never needed volume to be heard, and everyone in range of it felt the shift before they understood why. "I'm going to fund this child's dance education." A pause. Not for effect. Simply the space between one sentence and the next. Everything. For however long she wants to dance. He did not explain why. He did not ask anyone's opinion. He did not frame it as charity or initiative or community investment. He said it the way a man stated a fact about the weather, as though the outcome had already been decided and the only remaining question was whether the room would have the sense to keep up. For 3 full seconds, the Caldwell Terrace room produced no sound at all. Then someone near the donor tables began to clap, uncertain. A single pair of hands and a handful of others joined in the way people did when they weren't sure what had just happened, but suspected they were supposed to respond to it. Helena Marsh set her wine glass down. She did not clap. Zara Ellis was standing at the east edge of the dance floor. She had been there long enough that the tray in her hands had become part of her body. She couldn't have said whether she was holding it or it was holding her. The tray tilted 3 degrees to the left. She didn't notice. Her eyes were on Maya, standing in the center of that chandelier-lit room in her red coat, looking up at the man who had just made a public promise about her life, in a room full of people whose names Zara would never know. The orchestra played on. Nobody else heard it. She crossed the floor before she made the decision to cross it. "That's my daughter." Min-jae turned. His expression didn't shift into anything reassuring. It simply remained what it was: direct, steady, taking her in without adjusting itself for her. I know. The flatness of it should not have been calming. It wasn't. But it was something she could hold on to. She could work with. Flat. She couldn't work with smooth. "You don't know anything about her." "No," he said. "But I know what I saw." Jason Park stepped forward from behind him with the practiced ease of someone whose job was to convert uncomfortable situations into manageable ones. "Miss, I'm sure we can find a way." Zara turned her head. Just her head. The rest of her didn't move. "I wasn't talking to you." Jason Park stopped. Min-jae said without looking at him. "Neither was I." The silence that followed had a particular quality, the kind that happened after something was said that everyone in range would remember and none of them would repeat exactly right. Then Maya reached up and took Zara's hand. Not pulling, not demanding. Just placing her small fingers into her mother's palm the way she had since she was 2 years old, quietly confirming, "I'm here. I'm fine." Zara looked down at her daughter. Maya looked back. No fear in her face. No confusion. Just that same open, listening quality she'd had while the music was playing, as though she'd already made sense of something the adults around her were still working through. Zara exhaled. Min-jae reached into his jacket and produced a card. Standard weight, no embossing, his name on the front. He turned it over and wrote on the back in ink 2 lines. A name and a number, by hand. "His name is David Cho," he said, extending it to Zara. "He speaks for me when I can't speak plainly in a room full of people." Zara looked at the card. She looked at him. She took it. She did not say thank you. He did not appear to expect it. The Uber cost $31.50. Maya sat beside her in the back seat, the red coat still buttoned to the top, her small backpack on her lap. Chicago moved past the window, in streaks of wet amber light. A pharmacy sign, a bus shelter, the green glow of a late-night laundromat. Ordinary things, unchanged things. The city going about its Tuesday as though nothing had shifted on the 21st floor of a hotel 40 minutes ago. Maya looked out the window for a long time. "Mama?" "Yeah." Why did some people look at him like they were deciding something? Zara turned toward her daughter, in the shifting light. "What do you mean, baby?" Like Maya paused, searching for it. Like they were looking at him to figure out what face to make. 5 years old. In a room for 45 minutes. Reading something Zara had needed a full lifetime of practice to read. "Some people," Zara said carefully, "do that when they're not sure whether someone is safe." Maya received this with the gravity of a child genuinely working it out. Is he safe? The question hung in the back of the Uber between them, above the driver's jazz radio, beneath the amber wash of another streetlight sliding past the window. "I don't know yet," Zara said. "Okay." Maya nodded, once accepting the uncertainty the same way she had accepted the instruction to stay in the alcove, with a trust that was not blind but simply decided, and turned back to the window. She did not ask again. 12:23 a.m. Maya was asleep in the bedroom. The apartment was exactly as they had left it, dishes from breakfast still drying in the rack. Maya's drawings from the weekend spread across the coffee table, the radiator ticking through its nightly complaints. Zara sat at the kitchen table with her phone. She typed, Min-jae Kang, Chicago. The first results were finance pages. A Forbes profile from 14 months ago. Kang Capital Group, emerging investment firm. Assets under management approximately $340 million. CEO Min-jae Kang, 27 at time of publication. A photograph of him at a ribbon cutting for a community arts center on the west side. The same controlled, unrevealing face. She scrolled further. Page 2. A cached article from the Chicago Tribune. The original had been removed, but the cache still pulled it. A 2021 federal investigation into a money laundering network connected to several commercial real estate holdings. The investigation had been closed the following year. Insufficient evidence. Min Jae Kang's name appeared not as a named suspect but as a person described as associated with entities of interest. She scrolled further. A photograph. A funeral. Outdoors. Gray November sky. Min Jae Kang in a dark coat standing beside two men. The caption named the men. Beneath it, figures of interest in organized crime circles, Chicago field office, 2020. Zara set the phone face down on the table. She didn't turn it off. The screen stayed lit beneath it, a faint rectangle of light against the wood. She sat with it for a long time. The question was not whether Min Jae Kang could keep his promise. The question Zara Ellis sat with at 12:41 a.m. was one no search engine could answer. Whether the version of him that had watched her daughter dance was the version she would be dealing with, or whether there was another version entirely, waiting somewhere in the dark between the results. By 9 a.m. the next morning, the Sterling Meridian knew. Not the whole story. Hotels were like small towns trapped inside buildings. Facts rarely traveled without picking up additions along the way. But enough had moved through the staff corridors by the first breakfast service that when Zara arrived at the employee entrance at 7:53 a.m., she felt the shift before anyone said a word. A glance held a half-second too long in the locker room. A conversation that stopped when she rounded a corner in the hallway near the linen carts. A server named Deja, who had worked 3 galas with Zara and knew better than to waste words, caught up to her outside the equipment room and said only, "People are talking." "I know," Zara said. "You okay?" "I'm at work," Zara said. Which was not the same thing, and Deja understood that. And neither of them said anything else. By 10:30 a.m., Carol Hampton had heard 4 different versions of what happened on the 21st floor. None of them were entirely wrong. 2 of them were nowhere near entirely right. She waited until Zara's mid-morning break and walked her into the small operations office at the end of the service corridor. The one with the broken blind on the window and the coffee machine nobody had repaired since February. She closed the door. "Jason Park called this morning," Carol said. "He wants to arrange a meeting. Called it an educational opportunity discussion for Maya." Zara looked at her. "What did you say?" "I said I'd pass it along." Carol picked up her clipboard, set it back down. "Zara, I'm going to give you a name." She wrote it on a post-it note from the desk drawer. Patricia Webb. A phone number beneath it. Family law attorney. She doesn't do charity cases. Doesn't do discounted work as a favor to anyone, but she has a sliding scale for mothers who need someone standing in their corner rather than someone else's. She's argued 3 cases in front of the Illinois Supreme Court. She doesn't lose often, and when she does, she appeals. Zara looked at the name on the note. "How do you know her?" Carol Hampton picked up her clipboard again. "Because 14 years in hotel management means you've seen enough situations where someone needed her and didn't know it yet." She left. Zara folded the note once and put it in her apron pocket, against the card she had been carrying since the night before. At 2:17 p.m., Jason Park walked into the Sterling Meridian through the main lobby entrance. He did not go through Carol Hampton. He did not call ahead. He asked a front desk attendant for Zara Ellis, described her as a colleague of Mr. Kang's, and was directed toward the terrace level where the afternoon setup crew was working a corporate reception. He found her between a folding table and a catering cart, arranging a centerpiece. He set a thin folder on the corner of the table where she could see it clearly. He smiled the way men smiled when they had decided in advance that the conversation would go in their favor. "Mr. Kang's public statement last night was generous," he said. "We want to structure something formal that works for everyone." Zara straightened. She did not look at the folder. Jason opened it. The top sheet showed a figure. $650,000. Below it, a bullet-pointed summary. Housing assistance, private school enrollment, full dance curriculum funding, medical coverage for Maya through age 18. It looked, on the surface, like everything she had been awake at midnight worrying she would never be able to give her daughter. She looked at it for 4 seconds. Then she said, "What's on page 3? Jason Park's smile did not disappear. It simply became more precise. Standard image licensing agreement. Mr. Kang's firm would have the right to reference Maya's story in corporate social responsibility communications over a 5-year period. Very tasteful. Real impact. Real visibility for her. And for the program." The terrace had 12 other staff members in it. None of them were within earshot. Zara was aware of this the way she was always aware of the geometry of rooms she worked in. "My daughter," she said, "is not a communication strategy. Of course not. This is simply, and you came here without him knowing." Something shifted in Jason Park's expression. Not guilt, something closer to recalibration. Mister. Kang doesn't always see the full picture of what benefits him long term. That's why he has people around him who do. 3 seconds of silence. "Get out of my workspace," Zara said. "And if you come back here without his knowledge, I'll call security and I'll make sure Carol Hampton is standing next to me when I do." Jason Park closed the folder. He nodded once politely, infuriatingly, and left. Zara turned back to the centerpiece. She finished it. Her hands were steady. She was deeply, carefully furious, and she kept every bit of it off her face for the remaining 4 hours of her shift. David Cho called Min Jae at 3:44 p.m. He had not heard from Zara. He had heard from Carol Hampton, who had heard from Deja, who had been near the terrace corridor at 2:23 p.m. and put the pieces together quickly enough. The call lasted 47 seconds. David relayed what had happened. Min Jae said 3 sentences. David Cho would describe them to Zara's attorney later, only as clear, brief, and final, and then ended the call and dialed Jason Park directly. That call lasted 41 seconds. Jason Park did not appear in this story again. Patricia Webb's office was on the 9th floor of a building on South LaSalle Street. Not a large office, not a decorated one, but the kind of space that accumulated authority through use rather than design. Law books with cracked spines, a window overlooking the street, 2 chairs across from a desk that had clearly been worked at rather than presented. She shook Zara's hand without preamble and said, "I looked up the video from the gala. 3 different phones already have footage, which means his public statement has potential legal weight if properly structured." She sat. "The question is whether you want to build something on that foundation or walk away clean. I want to know if my daughter is safe," Zara said. Patricia Webb looked at her directly. "Those are 2 different conversations. But yes, let's have both." 6:03 a.m. Zara came out of the bedroom and stopped in the doorway. Maya was in the kitchen, not eating breakfast, not at the table. She was standing on the linoleum in her pajamas, the ones with the small yellow stars dancing. No music, no phone, no sound except what she was making quietly with her own mouth. A low, rhythmic hum that wasn't quite a melody. Just a pulse. Just a beat she was keeping with herself. Her feet moved in small patterns across the floor. Her arms lifted slightly, the way they had in the Caldwell Terrace room 3 nights ago, as though she were answering something only she could hear. She had no idea her mother was watching. Zara stood in the doorway and did not move for 41 seconds. She knew because the clock on the microwave changed once while she stood there, and she registered it without looking away from her daughter. Then she went to the counter and turned on the coffee machine. She picked up her phone. She called Patricia Webb. "Tell him no," she said when Patricia picked up. "Tell them all no. We're done." Patricia Webb was quiet for one measured moment. Then, for whose sake? The question was not unkind. It was not a challenge. It was simply a question dropped into the space between what Zara had said and what she had meant, and it landed somewhere she hadn't expected. She didn't answer. The coffee machine hummed. Down the hallway, faintly, she could still hear Maya's small hum still moving, still dancing, still keeping her own time in the kitchen while the city woke up around them. Zara thought about the girl who had finished a coloring book in a service alcove and followed the music anyway. She thought about the 41 seconds in the doorway. She thought about the difference between protecting her daughter and protecting herself from whatever this was going to cost. They felt like the same thing. They were not the same thing. She had known that at some level since midnight, and she had been working very hard not to look directly at it. She looked at it now. "Set up the meeting," she said. "But Patricia, you run it. Not him. Not his people." That, Patricia Webb said, was always the plan. Somewhere on the 47th floor of One Wacker Drive, in an office that was still lit at 7 a.m., long after everyone else had gone home, Min Jae Kang sat at his desk with a single piece of paper in front of him. Not a contract. Not a report. A photograph taken on a phone, forwarded through David Cho of Maya in her red coat, sitting in the service alcove with her coloring book open on her knees. He looked at it for a long time. Then he turned it face down and went back to work. Some things, he had come to understand, needed to be protected from himself. Patricia Webb's office held 7 people without feeling crowded, which said something about the way it had been arranged. Chairs pulled into a loose configuration, rather than the confrontational geometry of 2 sides facing each other across a table. The desk had been cleared of its usual working papers. A legal pad sat at Patricia's elbow. Keisha Morris, her junior associate, occupied the chair nearest the window, with a second legal pad and the careful stillness of someone trained to observe without contributing until asked. Carol Hampton sat along the side wall, not quite at the table, not quite outside the conversation. Patricia had called her the previous evening. I want an independent witness. Someone who knows both parties, owes neither of them, and has been in rooms like this before. Carol Hampton had said yes without asking what she would be witnessing. Min-jae Kang arrived at exactly 2 p.m. No Jason Park. No second phone, no tablet, none of the peripheral machinery he moved with at events. Only David Cho, who came in behind him and took the chair to his left with the quiet competence of a man who had sat in a great many difficult rooms and knew better than to treat any of them as routine. Zara was already seated when they arrived. Maya was in the far corner of the room, cross-legged on the floor with a sheet of paper and the same box of colored pencils she had carried to the gala. She looked up when Min-jae entered, considered him for a moment, and returned to her drawing. He looked at her before he sat down. Then he sat down. Patricia Webb did not open with pleasantries. She opened with a single legal pad page, the structural summary of why everyone was in this room, reduced to 12 lines. She read it without inflection, the way a person read the terms of something that needed to be understood before it could be agreed to or refused. When she finished, she set the page down and looked at Zara. Zara looked at Min-jae. I know what people say about you, she said. The room held itself. What people say? Min-jae replied, is not entirely wrong. That's not a denial. No. He met her eyes without looking away. It isn't. Zara set her hands flat on the table in front of her. Then tell me why I should let any of your money touch my daughter's life. The question was not delivered with heat. It was delivered with the precision of someone who had been awake at midnight with a search engine and a bad feeling, and had come here anyway because 41 seconds in a kitchen doorway had shifted something she couldn't put back. Min-jae did not answer immediately. Not the pause of a man building a performance. The pause of a man who was making a decision about what kind of answer to give. When he spoke, his voice was quieter than it had been at any point in the Caldwell Terrace room. My mother worked hotel banquets for 11 years, he said. Different hotels. Same black uniform. Same silver tray. A beat. She never complained about the work. She complained about one thing. She couldn't afford to pay for the one thing I was good at. By the time anyone with money noticed, I had already made different choices. He stopped there. He did not continue into explanation or justification. He said it the way a person stated a fact they had never said aloud before, not because they had been hiding it, but because no one had ever asked the direct question that required it. Zara looked at him. And you think funding Maya fixes that? No. He shook his head once. Nothing fixes that. But I saw something on that floor that I was not willing to watch disappear because of money. I have watched enough things disappear because of money. Carol Hampton did not move along the side wall. She was looking at the table in front of her, and the particular set of her mouth said she had filed something away that she would think about later, when she was alone. Patricia Webb wrote 3 words on her legal pad and underlined them. She did not show anyone what they were. The room was quiet, for a moment that lasted longer than it measured. Then, from the corner near the window, a small voice said, Mr. Kang? Everyone turned. Maya had looked up from her drawing. She was holding a blue pencil in one hand. Her expression was the expression she wore when she was working something out, the same focused, open-faced attention she brought to the music in the Caldwell Terrace room, now directed at the man sitting at the table across the room. Min-jae turned toward her. Why do some people look at you like they're scared? The room produced no sound at all, not the polite quiet of a pause between sentences. The deeper quiet of 7 people who had each, in that moment, stopped the background noise of their own thinking and arrived in the same present second. Keisha Morris's pen rested against her legal pad without writing. David Cho looked at the window. Patricia Webb looked at Maya. Carol Hampton looked at Min Jae. He looked at the child for 4 full seconds, not gathering a response, not managing the question, taking it seriously, the way it had been offered without guile, without agenda, with the uncomplicated directness of a person who had not yet learned that some questions were not supposed to be asked in rooms like this. Because I made choices that frightened people, he said. Maya tilted her head slightly. Were they good choices? Some were. He held her gaze. Some weren't. Maya considered this with the gravity it deserved. Then, my mama says everyone gets some wrong ones. Your mother, Min Jae said, is right. Maya nodded, satisfied with the answer, and turned back to her drawing. The room slowly began to breathe again. Patricia Webb set her pen down and let the silence finish before she picked it back up. Across the table, Zara was looking at her daughter and then at the man her daughter had just asked the question she could not have asked, and the expression on her face was not trust, and it was not warmth, but it was something more durable than either. The expression of a woman who had just watched a person be looked at by a 5-year-old and not flinch, and not perform, and not lie. Patricia Webb opened the folder. The trust structure, she said, returning the room to its purpose without apology. $487,000, held in a protected educational trust. The funds are designated for Maya's dance training, academic schooling, medical coverage, and housing support for the household she lives in with her mother. I am the named trustee, not David Cho's office, not anyone affiliated with Kang Capital Group. The funds cannot be recalled unilaterally. They cannot be redirected. They cannot be used for any purpose outside Maya's direct benefit as defined in the document. She looked at Min Jae. There is no media clause, no licensing agreement, no corporate communication rights. David Cho leaned forward slightly. Patricia, on the question of a limited visibility arrangement if we could revisit, it won't be in the document, David, Min Jae said. David turned to him. Min Jae, from a positioning standpoint, even a minimal reference. It won't be in the document. The second time, it was quieter than the first. That was the only difference. But something in the quality of the quiet made David Cho set his pen down and not pick it back up again. Patricia Webb turned a page. Then we're in agreement on the structure. The signing took 9 minutes. No camera. No handshake photograph. No statement drafted in advance for any publication. Zara signed first, her name clear and unhurried. The signature of a woman who had made a decision and was not second-guessing it in real time. Patricia Webb signed as trustee. David Cho signed as Min Jae's attorney of record. Min Jae signed last. When he set the pen down, Maya had just finished her drawing. She stood up from the corner, walked to the table, and held the page up toward her mother to show her. Zara reached down and took it. A figure, small and simply drawn, 2 arms raised, body in motion, rendered in blue pencil with the confident imprecision of a 5-year-old who knew exactly what she meant, even if the lines didn't agree. Below the figure, in the large, uneven letters Maya had been practicing at preschool since September, Maya dances. Min Jae Kang looked at that piece of paper for 10 seconds. He didn't reach for it. He didn't ask to hold it. He simply looked at it, where it rested in Zara's hands, and for those 10 seconds the expression on his face was not controlled, and it was not performed, and no one in the room said anything, because there was nothing to say that would have added to what was already there. Keisha Morris looked at her legal pad. Carol Hampton looked at her hands. Patricia Webb looked at Min Jae, and then at Zara, and then wrote 2 more words on the legal pad below the first 3. She underlined those as well. The meeting ended 12 minutes later. 3 months later, on a Tuesday morning in February, Maya Ellis walked through the front door of the Harrington School of Dance, with a new bag on her shoulder and her mother's hand in hers. In the front pocket of that bag, tucked between a granola bar and a hair tie, was a plain white card with 5 words on the front. She had decided, without telling anyone, to keep it. 6 months is long enough for some things to set. Not harden, that was a different thing entirely. Just set. Like something placed carefully on a surface and left there long enough that it stopped feeling temporary. Maya Ellis had been attending the Harrington School of Dance for 4 months and 3 weeks when Renee Carter asked Zara to stay after class. Carter had been teaching for 31 years. She had come up in a generation of dancers who understood that talent without discipline was decoration, and the program she ran was not a decorative one. Parents who enrolled their children expecting warmth left the first observation session slightly unsettled and either returned the following week or didn't. The parents who returned stayed for years. She said it without preface. Seated across from Zara in the small office adjacent to the main studio, technique manuals on the shelving behind her, practice mirrors on the wall. She's not my most technically precise student. She's 5, which explains part of that, and she's only been here 4 weeks, which explains the rest. Carter folded her hands on the desk. But she's the only student I currently teach who makes the other children stop what they're doing and watch. Not because she's performing for them, because they can feel that something is happening. Zara said nothing. I can teach technique, Carter continued. I cannot teach whatever that is. So I intend to teach technique, and I intend to be very careful not to teach the other thing out of her in the process. Zara looked at the woman across the desk, the economy of her words, the clear-eyed specificity of someone who had seen enough talent move through this room to know the difference between the kind that lasted and the kind that burned early and went quiet. Last Thursday, Carter added. She stood in the center of the floor for 45 seconds without moving because she was listening to something the rest of the class couldn't locate. A pause. Don't worry about that. I've been waiting for a student who does that for about 6 years. The apartment in Bridgeport was on the 3rd floor, with windows that looked out onto a small park where 2 oak trees had managed to survive everything the city had built around them. Maya had her own room for the first time in her life. The first 3 nights she migrated to Zara's bed at 2 a.m. without explanation. Zara moved over and said nothing about it. By the 4th week, she was sleeping through to morning on her own. Zara had taken the operations coordinator position at an event company in River North. She had been building toward that role for 2 years without the money to pursue the certification it required. The trust covered the training program. The rest was the interview she had walked into prepared, the references she had earned, and the work she had always been doing even when no one in any room had been watching it. The certification cost $2,340. She paid for it herself. David Cho arrived at Min Jae's office at 8:30 a.m. on a Wednesday in March. On the desk between them sat a partnership agreement 43 pages, 7-year binding period, the kind of document that had taken 2 months and 4 attorneys to construct. The entity on the other side was one Min Jae had worked alongside for 4 years, a relationship described, in the careful language his industry used for such arrangements, as mutually beneficial. Min Jae read the document once. Then again, more slowly, his finger moving along certain margins the way a person moved through terrain they were checking for something specific. He set it down. Would my mother have signed this? David Cho looked at him across the desk. He looked at the document. He looked at the window. He looked at a point on the wall that had nothing on it. He did not answer because there was only one honest answer, and they both already knew what it was. Min Jae pushed the folder back across the desk. Then we don't. David Cho picked up the folder. He straightened his papers. He did not say anything about the $14.3 million it represented, or the 4 years of relationship it terminated, or the complications that would follow the call he needed to make before noon. After he left, Min Jae sat alone in the office with what that decision weighed. No one would applaud it. No one outside this room would know it had happened. It was not redemption. It was not the first right thing he had ever done, nor the last wrong thing he would consider. It was simply a man sitting with a question a 5-year-old had asked him, realizing he could no longer answer it with calculation, and deciding not once for all time, but today, in this office, for this particular document that he would not try. The Harrington School's spring performance was held on a Friday evening in April. 47 chairs in 6 rows. A stage that was really just the main studio floor with the lights adjusted. Programs printed on white cardstock, students' names in alphabetical order, plain black type. Maya had 90 seconds in the group piece, not a solo. She knew this and had not complained. I'm still a small dancer, Mama. Small dancers do group. Zara sat in the 2nd row beside Carol Hampton, who had taken a personal day without telling anyone at the Sterling Meridian where she was spending it. Patricia Webb was in the 3rd row. She had not told Zara she was coming. Before the lights went down, Zara looked toward the back of the room. Last row. Far right. A figure in a dark coat, sitting slightly forward in the way of someone not accustomed to folding chairs. No phone in hand, no one beside him. Nothing between him and the room, except the ordinary quiet of a person who had come only to watch. He was not looking around. He was looking at the stage. The music began. 7 children, ages 5 through 8. Their levels of technical precision distributed accordingly. Maya was third from the left red leotard, hair pulled back the way Carter required, feet already finding the tempo before the second measure arrived. 90 seconds. Not a showcase. Not a revelation. Exactly what it was. A small dancer in a group piece, on a studio floor, doing the thing she had been doing since before anyone gave it a name. 34 seconds in, the music shifted into its second phrase. The choreography called for a held position, arms extended. Weight forward, stillness. Maya held it through the count and a half that was written. And then, in the breath before the next movement, she did something that wasn't in the choreography. A small adjustment, barely a quarter step, an answer to something in the music the arrangement hadn't accounted for. Renee Carter, standing in the wing, wrote one word in the margin of her program. She circled it. She did not show it to anyone. After the performance, Maya found Zara immediately running, still half dancing, the energy of the stage not yet settled back into ordinary motion. Did you see the part at the end? I saw it. Did I? You were exactly right. Carol Hampton hugged her next. Patricia Webb shook her hand with the formality that made Maya stand a full inch straighter without being instructed to. The lobby filled with the warm noise of families who had just watched something they were glad to have seen. Zara looked toward the back of the room. He was waiting at the edge of the dispersing crowd, not moving toward her, in the way of a man who understood that people needed room to choose whether to close a distance. She walked over. You came, she said. Yes. They stood in the narrow space between the last row of chairs and the back wall. Maya's voice carried across the lobby, explaining the choreography to Carol Hampton in terms that were precise and only partially accurate. You kept your promise, Zara said. Minjae looked past her toward the stage, where Renee Carter was already stacking programs with the brisk efficiency of someone planning next month's rehearsal schedule. I'm still keeping it. Zara studied him for a moment. Not with suspicion, not with warmth. Something steadier than either. Something built slowly over 6 months of watching a person do what they said they would do without requiring acknowledgement for it. Are you okay? She asked. She did not know exactly why she asked. She asked it anyway. Minjae was quiet for a moment that was longer than a social pause and shorter than an admission. I don't know, he said. Zara nodded once. That sounds honest. She went back to her daughter. He stood there a few more seconds, alone, in the back of a room that smelled of wooden floors and rosin and the particular warmth of children who had just done something they were proud of. Then he buttoned his coat and walked toward the door. He did not look back. They walked home through the April night, 16 blocks south through streets that had finally decided to let the cold go for the season. Maya had her dance bag over one shoulder and the folded program in her coat pocket. She walked the way she always walked, when the day had gone well, with occasional extra steps that had no destination, small variations that answered something in her own internal rhythm. Mama? Yeah. Maya thought about it for a full half block, the careful thinking of a child who had learned that some questions deserved the right words before they were spoken. Is dancing something that can change a whole life? Zara walked another half block before she answered. I think it changes the person who's willing to let it. Maya received this, turned it over, filed it in whatever place 5-year-olds stored things that were too large to fully understand yet but too important to put down. Okay, she said. And then she took one extra step sideways, small, answering something only she could hear, and kept walking. This story is a work of fiction. All characters, events, and situations depicted are entirely imaginary and do not represent any real persons or actual events. Created for storytelling and emotional exploration only. If you made it to the end of this story, you already know this one was never really about the gala, or the trust fund, or the promise made in front of chandeliers. It was about the 41 seconds Zara spent standing in a kitchen doorway watching her daughter dance alone at 6'0" the morning. It was about a man who learned to ask a different question from a 5-year-old who had no idea she was teaching him anything. It was about a child who followed the music before anyone gave her permission and kept following it long after the rest of the world started paying attention. Tell me in the comments, which moment in this story stayed with you? Was it Maya asking, were they good choices? Was it Zara on the phone at 6:19 a.m., changing her answer? Was it Minjae sitting alone in the back row of 47 chairs, with nothing between him and what he was watching? And where in the world are you right now? Drop your city and your local time below. This channel has people watching from every time zone, every hour, and I want to know exactly where this story found you tonight. If something in this moved you, leave a like. It takes 1 second, and it tells me this kind of storytelling is worth continuing. Subscribe if you haven't already, because the next story is coming, and it will be different from this one. But it will carry the same belief that the most powerful things that happen between people usually happen quietly, in rooms where no one important is watching. Until then,